Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Today, for the next 30 minutes, 45 minutes, we're going to talk about cloud security assessments and how you can use various tools to conduct cloud security assessments, right? So today we've got Vishal Patel. He's one of our team members from KPMG, our cloud security practice, and he's going to be taking over soon, going through the various platforms, various tools, various strategies that are available for cloud security assessment. Vishal, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arani. So good morning, everyone. And if you see me kind of looking here and there, that's because I have multiple screens. So apologies. So yeah, as Arani mentioned, I work at KPMG, and currently I'm working as a cloud security manager. And as part of that, today we are presenting this talk or presentation on cloud security posture ninja. So what we are going to talk about is how can you do cloud security assessments and what are different approaches. So I think our agenda today, it's very kind of simple introduction. Then what are the kind of root causes, or what are the some common misconfigurations, right, which are responsible for majority of the cloud security incidents. And then the cloud 101 topic, shared responsibility model. And finally, we will go through different approaches on how to assess security of your cloud environment. So what you are seeing right now, these are the top security threats impacting any cloud environment, right? And this data was released recently by Cloud Security Alliance. So it was released in, I think, June of this year. So every year they publish the trending threats in the cloud community or cloud environment. And what I want to kind of highlight is misconfigurations are still in the top 5 list. Earlier, this was kind of trading at like number 1 or number 2, but now even if it is kind of came down to number 3, what I'm trying to say is, after this many years, we still have misconfigurations as one of the key threat in the cloud security. So what in the upcoming slides, what we are going to see is what are some of the common misconfigurations, right? What solutions are out there, what native tools are out there, and how you can kind of assess security of your cloud environment. So first and foremost, like, what is misconfiguration, right? So misconfiguration is basically any incorrect configuration, right? And so basically, when you are not configuring any cloud services correctly, you are leaving that service open to security attacks, right? Here we are kind of providing a couple of examples. There is not an exhaustive list. Just to kind of start with, the first one is unrestricted inbound, outbound traffic rules, right? So in Azure, it is we have network security groups, and which basically controls incoming and outgoing traffic when it is attached to, let's say, a subnet or a virtual machine or computing instance, right? Now, the default configurations maybe like for some environment, the default configurations will kind of expose your network. As an example, the outbound rule for majority of the service providers allows outbound traffic to the internet, right? And that may be for various reasons, for the services to communicate with the cloud service providers, other components. But depending on your requirements, how to or whether to tighten those configurations, right? Because that imagine if your compute instance or virtual machine is compromised, that machine can talk to internet unrestricted, right? So that is one of the very common, I would say, misconfiguration that we see based on our experience. The second one, I think many of you may have already kind of seen in the news, and I'll show you one more statistics in the upcoming slide. Public exposure of storage accounts or storage blobs in AWS. So basically, these are the services which stores your data, right? And you can easily make them kind of public or internet exposable. Now, that misconfiguration has exposed so many enterprises in the past. So this is again like in the news type of misconfiguration. REST, overly permissive cloud account. So like the global admin account for Azure environment, right? Normally a good practice is to not use your global admin or root account in AWS for day-to-day activities, right? But still, that practice is not completely followed. Even if we talk about other type of privilege accounts, then there are owner contributor type of accounts in Azure. And the best practice is to limit down the privileges and use only the required privileges, right? So if an account gets compromised, then the blast radius will be limited, right? But that that kind of practice is still not kind of followed very well, and we still see kind of owner contributor type of accounts, right? The next one is security logging. Now, security logging in cloud is a bit different than your traditional on-prem environment. The reason being, there are different APIs, there are different services in your cloud environment, and each service emits different type of logs, right? By default, let's say cloud providers may provide some logs, but without a clear understanding of what logs to enable and for how long those logs are available to the customers, you are going to miss a big part in the logging requirement. Meaning, for example, like in Azure, the logs are available for certain duration, right? And if you are not exporting it out, then you are kind of losing if any incident occurs beyond that duration. So uh, that's the key part, right? Understanding what logs you have, and then how to configure those logs to be exported to your security monitoring solutions. And the related kind of topic is monitoring, right? Like the fundamental alerts that one should configure on your cloud environment, that is still kind of not happening in the ground or in the reality. Now, weak secrets or key management. So you may have kind of seen security incidents where like API credentials or like passwords or tokens, authentication tokens, those are hard coded and in the infrastructure code or in a code repository, right? So that is again very, I would say, like trending misconfiguration in the cloud security realm. The next one, using default operating system images without hardening. So what we have seen is uh, like the clients or like the end users, they are using, let's say, service provider images, right? So in AWS, Azure, GCP, they all provide you with the default images. Now, the default images may already have like some kind of security configurations, but that doesn't mean that it fits your requirement or it fits kind of your size, right? So each image or each kind of environment has a different security requirement. So not hardening those OS images, that is another common cause. And the last one is unencrypted backup. So if you are taking backups of your, let's say, virtual machine data disk, and if you are leaving that data disk unencrypted, that means your data is kind of residing in clear vision, right? So again, this is not a complete list, but just some common themes or common configurations that we are seeing and that we have seen based on our experience. So what I'm showing here is an example of cloud security incidents based on the one of the factor that we saw around misconfigure cloud buckets or cloud storages, right? So pay attention to the data exposed column, right? And these are recent, I would say, incidents, recent being like this year and last year, and across multiple cloud providers. Again, not highlighting a particular cloud provider, but here mainly showing the statistic that these incidents are still happening today, right? And the amount of data that is getting exposed, it's a lot. I think recently one of the major international airline provider had their AWS S3 bucket kind of exposed, and that had around 6 terabyte of data. So again, misconfigurations are still happening, and with the new services uh, that the service providers are introducing, your attack surface keeps increasing, right? So just for an illustration purpose, what you are seeing here is a list of services or chart of services for Azure, right? And nowadays we have seen more cloud services rather than the traditional ones. So your compute storage services, now more we see in the PaaS area, platform as a service. Sorry, we see the analytics, data analytics type of service, right? So for those services now, new attack vectors are kind of coming in, and if you are not keeping updated with the security configurations that you have, then you are missing out, and then you are kind of like there are new attack vectors or new attack paths which you are not probably aware of, right? And the next question is where can you find, or where to kind of start with, right, for these new services. So all the major cloud service providers, they do provide a good documentation about their native services. So the first and foremost place to go is cloud service provider documentation, right? Because that will tell you what configurations you as a customer are exposed to, and you are responsible to kind of configure, right? Because in the cloud security, we have this fundamental, I would say, concept of shared responsibility model, right? If you are not understanding the shared responsibility model correctly, right, then that leaves the door open for attackers, because then you are not configuring your cloud environments correctly, right? And we have seen that, and as I gave you example of like PaaS services, we are seeing that more now in the industry as well. So I'll just quickly go over through, I think, different areas of responsibility, right? What a cloud consumer is responsible for, what a cloud provider is responsible for. And as you can notice, right, with as you go from like infrastructure as service to platform as service and software as service, maybe your responsibilities are kind of decreasing, right? But that doesn't mean like you are like, let's say in SaaS, you are not responsible for anything and everything is like cloud service provider is responsible, right? You still have a responsibility to kind of configure or implement proper security controls across these domains, right? And uh, with like the cloud provides you this great power of configuring, or like configuration power, right? Like within clicks, you can kind of spin out like cloud instances, cloud environment, but with great power on configurations comes greater responsibilities for security. And that's what kind of we saw, right? Like if you do not kind of configure proper security controls, that means you are leaving the door open. So the question is, where do you start from? Let's say if you are like if you like if someone comes to you and asks you, okay, we want to assess our environment, then what are the next immediate steps, right? So the very first thing is to understand the services, or the, I would say, like different types of resources being used in the cloud environment. And the reason you want to do this is later on in the solutions, in the cloud security posture management solutions, you can basically check whether those type of services are covered or not, right? So here I'm giving you an example of how easily you can see what resources you have in your cloud environment, right? So what you are seeing is in the Azure portal, there's, I think in the homepage, you can go and check all the resources, right? And the types is what you want to focus on. I'm not talking about like how many resources you have. This is mainly what type of resources you have, right? And once you have identified that, then cloud service providers, at least the major or key cloud service providers, they do provide native solutions, right? These native solutions are, to start with, like in Azure, you have Defender for Cloud. And it has both premium and I would say like paid version, but the premium like the free version gives you at least the recommendations, right? Which kind of, in simple terms, it goes through your environment, it scans the configurations, and it will tell you whether you are following best practices or not, right? So this is, I would say, like the first point to start with, and you will be surprised that in your kind of own or in any kind of cloud environment, even if you kind of try to follow these recommendations, then you are at least tightening screws on those configurations. You may not be completely covering 100%, but still you will be better than I think what you were before, right? So to continue with in our example, for Defender for Cloud, it also provides kind of mapping against compliance frameworks, right? For example, CS, Azure Benchmark, then like PCI DSS, then ISO. So if you have, like, you can kind of map your compliance requirements as well. And behind the kind of screen, or so like behind the Defender for Cloud, it's the Azure policy, which is the engine, right? Which is where you kind of create those rules. So by default, I think Defender for Cloud provides a good coverage, right? So similar to that, you have command center, security command center for GCP, Google Cloud Platform, and for Amazon Web Services, you have Security Hub, right? So start using those native solutions, because from there you get like the first really good output, and you can start kind of mitigating those vulnerabilities, right? Now the exercise that I kind of asked, right? Like understanding what resources you have, what type of resources you have, and why that is important is because the native solutions will, let's say, cover majority of the services, right? However, there may be gaps in the native solutions. And just to give you an example, for Defender for Cloud, there are certain services for which it does not give you recommendations, right? So once you have figured out what services you have, and then you can check what services are already covered by the CSPM, like native CSPM solution, then you know where to put your additional efforts, right? And like which services are not covered. So you can then take other routes. For example, you can manually go through those services, you can review those services. But the fundamental part is making sure that all your services are covered either through automated solutions, right? Or through, let's say, the manual approach, which we are going to see in a while. So, and there are other, I would say, products in the market, right? But before, I think you kind of use any CSPM, cloud security posture management solution, the first and foremost exercise to do is understanding the coverage of those services, right? What do we mean by that? So let's say a particular CSPM solution, right? Whether that is covering the service provider that you are using, and even for that service provider, what different services the CSPM solution is covering, right? Uh, Now, inside each services, you also want to check how deep or like what security configurations are covered, because surprisingly, uh, we have seen in our kind of experience that um, the service wide coverage, right, that is still where I think majority of the products are still kind of growing. So in this segment of like market, right, what you will probably see or what you may see is a particular solution may cover like a range of different services, but how well they are doing inside each service, right? For example, let's say data analytics type of service, right, or Azure Databricks, whether all the controls, right, are covered by a particular solution or not, right? So that is the key, I would say, due diligence exercise one should do before going or before selecting for a CSPM solution, because there are different type of, I would say, controls kind of available to the consumer, right? And depending on that, so first understand what controls you have. Second, understand whether those controls or those configurations will be covered by the cloud server, by the CSPM solution or not, right? Apart from that, the number three item is ability to create custom queries or detection rules. So, for example, and the CSPM solutions will provide you out of the box detection rules, right? However, depending on your compliance requirements or your security requirements, if you want to create additional rules, how easily you can do it and whether that is available or not, right? And we have seen that the data which is, or so just I think I would say take a step back, right? Like how normally these solutions will work is they will get data from your cloud environment, so all the configuration data or metadata from your cloud environment, and basically some logic will be running on those data to identify if there are misconfigurations or not, right, or security gaps or not. Now, behind the screen, there may be kind of like some engine which is parsing the data and then ultimately exposing, the kind of data to you, right? Now, there may be, let's say, if you have requirements to create queries on certain type of configurations, right? However, if that configuration or if that data is not available through CSPM solution, then you can't really monitor it through like the third party CSPM solution, right? You may have to kind of check the native solution, right? Whether native solution or native service can actually give you that control or not. So another, I would say, lessons learned based on our experience in this CSPM solutions market. And the last two items around findings or gaps. So typically, a CSPM solution will kind of go through your configurations, right, and will tell you what are the gaps or weaknesses, and whether there is any prioritization of those weaknesses, right? And if there are similar type of weakness, then whether those are kind of correlated or if there's some, kind of a business logic, right? Or for example, there may be critical assets, right? And those assets are kind of tagged with, let's say, production critical tag, right? So whether solutions are taking that type of context when prioritizing the findings or not, right? So again, these are some factors to consider when you are going for like a security posture management or monitoring solution. And nowadays, what we are also seeing is the automated remediation capability also being introduced. Now, depending on your organization, right? Uh, there may be, let's say, like some organizations we are seeing, they do want to use those type of capabilities, but then there may be organizations for which there are kind of checks, manual checks happening before kind of doing any changes, right? So again, auto remediation part, I haven't put that in the slide, but depending on your requirement, that can be another factor as well. So up until now, I think we talked about the automated way to find misconfigurations, right? Now, the how to cover the remaining part, because automated solutions most likely will not cover like end-to-end 100%, right? They will still give you like good amount of coverage, but there will be delta, meaning there will be security controls left out, which you should pay attention to, right? So then comes the manual kind of assessment part, where you combine the automated as well as like the manual part, in which doing the deep dives or kind of console walkthroughs of your kind of customer environment, right? And going through the configurations which are not covered by the automated solutions, right? And the kind of primary advantage is you will understand the business context, uh, because let's say if you find a particular gaps, right, then based on the discussions with the with your kind of stakeholders, you will understand whether that's a high priority, right, or high severity, medium severity, or low severity, right? So again, what are some of the controls that you may want to cover during your manual assessment? So we can start with the access control, right? And the first one is around whether the least privilege rules are being used or not. So I already gave you an example of kind of privilege rules in the Azure environment, right? So for Azure, each service, or at least I would say majority of the services have their own, or not own, but like the least privilege rules, right? So using those least privilege rules will reduce like the ultimately like what a particular rule can do, and reduce the blast or attack surface, right? The second point is around inactive users assigned to the roles, right? There may be instances where a particular roles or roles have like inactive users, and the users may have been there for like during the migration or during the implementation phase, right? Networking part is around, let's say, the first one, like traffic routed to the firewall or not. So imagine if the automated solution is giving you the finding that inbound and outbound rules are not kind of restricted, right? However, if all the internet outbound traffic is routed to the firewall, right? Whether the severity of that finding, will it be same or will it be reduced, right? So that type of kind of context you will get in the manual assessment. The remaining parts, I know we are kind of almost about to finish, so I'm not going to cover each and everything in detail, but in summary, like there will still be controls which you may want to check, right? So those are what we have given here is some common controls, not a complete list, but that's pretty much it. So I hope you may have gained some knowledge or some information about how to do cloud security assessments and how to kind of become a pro in doing this type of assessment. And with that, if you have any questions, feel free to. Okay, I see. First question, do the lake of how can we automate this? Yeah, so like the automation part, how can we automate the configuration and verification process, right? So I think that's exactly what we were highlighting, right? Like using your native capabilities to do that. So configuration monitoring through Defender or through the native solutions, like these solutions are out there. meaning like those are available for you to use. So that you can use for verification part, and automating the configuration that you can do through infrastructure as a code approach, right? And you can put additional check over there. So before your cloud resources are created, the configurations are checked. And if you have any particular question, I think you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to kind of discuss with you.